you're sick of that, you got to support the National Black Arts Festival and these kind of films, because that's the way they get out there. Yes, sir. First question.
First thing I want to do is say thank you to the filmmakers, everybody involved in making the film. It was amazing. And it was very inspirational. And I learned a lot. You guys did an excellent job. And I also want to say thank you to everyone on the stage who was part of the movement back then. Not only the brothers and sisters on the stage, but Bunchy and everybody else who may have passed on, and people who are still living here and there. Everyone who was involved in that struggle, I want to say a heartfelt thank you to all of you. Just real quick, I was curious to know what was the fallout when Huey shut down the LA chapter of the Panthers. What happened emotionally? What happened to the people who were members? I would imagine that was very traumatic, and I would like to hear more about that. And then the last thing is, whenever you do a movie like this, there's always things that were left out, or you look at it and I say, there's a story or point of view or something that I wish was in the movie. And I was curious to know from people who were on the panel, what was unsaid that you would like for us to know that may have not made it into the movie.
Thanks a lot, brother, for your compliments. We really appreciate that. I would just like to say that it's left out in this version because the movie is not 100% finished yet, but that is going to be fit right in here, is that one of the Steiner brothers, Watani Steiner, turned himself back into San Quentin. And he turned himself back in because while he was on the run, he fathered some children out of the country and they were living in poverty. So he turned himself back in and made a deal with the United States government that his children could come back here. And I've talked to him extensively on the telephone from prison. I've tried to record the conversations, but strangely enough, only when he calls collect, there's a serious buzz on any line. So it's coming from their end because I've tried it from various phones. So he did turn himself in, and obviously he probably wasn't working for the FBI if he turned himself back in. But it did seem that with the investigation that he and I have both done, he feels like his friend Tawala was probably working for the FBI, and something with him starting that argument with Elaine. And, she says it was a get your hand out of my pocket moment, referring to when Malcolm X was murdered. So that will be in the film once we can get into San Quentin and interview with Tani Steiner. That piece will be in there.
All right, to answer your question about the LA chapter, you have to go back in time a little bit. And Huey had gotten out of jail. And, I was a young boy then. But to tell you a secret, I said we need to blow him away. But I was so young, wouldn't nobody listen to me. So, but Huey, in my opinion, he got hooked in the jailhouse. And when he came out, he started calling himself the Supreme Commander. Then he set up a goon squad that would attack people that had a different aspect. And at this time, Eldridge Cleaver was in Algeria, Eldridge and Kathleen. And this, by the friendship that Bunchy and Eldridge had, this was always our avenue to express our grievances, was back through Eldridge Cleaver. So Huey started consolidating power, and we all felt it. Then he started saying he was the Supreme Commander. Then at that point, Geronimo and a lot of the Panthers that were on bail at that time left. They jumped bail. And that was the beginning of the Black Liberation Army. I couldn't go because my mother bailed me out. And she would have lost the house and whooped me, so I had to stay. You know what I mean? I couldn't go with Geronimo. So I had to stay. So anyway, I was still here in LA, and I had kind of disassociated myself from the party. And at that point, they sent the goon squad out to see me. And they attacked me out in Watts. And it didn't work out too well for them. But, you know, we got by that. And then at that point, I told them that I didn't want to see no Black Panthers east of Central Avenue. I said, I don't want to see. You know, if you come across Central, then you got an issue. And then beyond that, you know, they crossed Geronimo and Roland down in Texas and got them busted. And then they expelled Eldridge and the people in New York on trial out of that section. So we all backed off from the Black Panthers. That became Huey's gang. And it was not the Black Panther Party at that time. So there was no remorse. The only remorse was they had the newspaper and the money so they could put their view out. And what I learned in struggle and in that going down is that the soldiers, the real soldiers, never strive for recognition or credibility. So when these moves go down, they're always out of pocket because they're generally working on the side of the people, and they don't put themselves in that money-grubbing, ego-tripping power mode. And other people that strive for those positions are not really real. And they move to take over the organization and bend people's thoughts their way. So it was very tragic that Huey himself destroyed the party, but by the same token, that was not the same Huey that started the party. I've got to give credit where credit is due. And Huey Newton was a very powerful man. This is why they busted Huey Newton and separated him from all his people where they could exploit his weakness. And this is COINTELPRO. This is COINTELPRO. So they killed Huey Newton and killed the party. That's the end of that.
I just want to, I want to just give you a little visual because I was out of the country and I came back when when was the trial for the shootout? Was it 71? I came back, and by this time there had been a series of expulsions in the party, and so you have to go through all the metal detectors, etc. They have so much security that ordinary people don't even want to come to the trial. You go through all the security, you come in, you sit in the courtroom. It's bailiffs, very, very armed, very tense. And here the brothers who were in the shootout are in blue, which is prison clothes. They're going to trial from prison. And the other Panthers, who are the Huey Newton Panthers, they all got the latest clothes and the long hair. They look like dandies out of, what is that? Superfly. They just look embarrassing. They're calling themselves the Panthers. So what you have here is a situation in which you can see who's a revolutionary and who's not. And the revolutionaries were all being expelled and run out and denounced, etc. And these people, we in Atlanta, in Algeria, we began to refer them as the Peralta Street Gang, because that's their office. So you had the revolutionary movement disbanded and destroyed. And this is extraordinarily difficult and painful because everyone came together collectively to put this movement in place. But then there's some people who want to use it to their benefit and take it as personal property, and then they've lost that revolutionary momentum. And that affected everyone in this organization, and it was particularly intense in Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, and Algiers, which is the international section, was just excluded.
Dr. Scott.
Yes, I was just going to say, in any movie you can't include everything, right? And there's a lot that, go back to your question about a story that could have been told too. In my work, I was interested in not seeing the Black Panther Party through the US organization's lens or vice versa. And there's a whole history of cooperation between the groups. That's a part that I talked about in the interview that would be another story. The other thing is it's important to see that you can look at this and think that the most important conflict is intergroup conflict. But the way that COINTELPRO worked, both groups were having internal dissension and internal manipulations of these kind of conflicts at the same time. And so you had clashes going this way, but you also had a kind of implosion happening at the same time with all that pressure that if you probably can't capture all of that. But those are just two things. And the last point is for me to think about going forward is the problem of the cult of the personality. Whether you're the supreme servant, whether you're the master teacher, whether you're the honorable this or that, if you can't call a brother or sister by their first name, keep your guard up.
All right, yes, sir.
Yeah, first, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. First of all, I want to give love and props to the filmmaker. Making a film is more than a notion. And my question is a question of imagination and dreaming. And that question is, what if there was no COINTELPRO? What do you think would have happened with the Panther Party and us? How would those two organizations have evolved and grown? And that's for whoever wants to take it.
Who wants to take that?
Well, number one, COINTELPRO is a counterintelligence program. So you had groups who definitely were looked upon as being some kind of intelligent movement. I would like to say, other than my mother and father, the heroes as a 9, 10, and 11-year-old kid happened to be real people doing real things, such as Kathleen Cleaver and Ewing and everybody like that. So it's my belief that the beginning and the dropping of the seeds of using culture happened around 71, 72, once blaxploitation flicks start coming out. And then people stop looking at real people who were on trial, who have been shot up by police, and start looking at these created fictional heroes that happen to be in Hollywood in 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, and diverting their attention to like, woo. And so if they wear Superfly clothes, it's coming from a movie that's in every hood. This was impetus on when we decided to do music and rap music, a music that everybody ignored because it was just some old black-ish under the radar. My guys, we grew up in the 60s and we understood the emotion and the sentiment, and we said, you know what, they're using music and they're using movies as coming up with these fabricated heroes. And not to say we're gonna become heroes, but our whole goal was to point to the real heroes who were doing real things. Then comes, okay, like I said, racism is a brand, just like a new model car. They're gonna come up with a counter-intelligence to a move that you put down. We knew we only had 3 to 5 years before we seep into what? Maybe music, rap, Hollywood, and by 1991, to fight the power with the gin and juice real quick. We ain't got off of that road in 19 years. Every time I hear people like, yo, so when you think things gonna change? Things ain't gonna change that way. Things are gonna change in another way from someplace else when some undercurrent that points to real people again. That's why, you know what, if Greg's film isn't being supported, it isn't being seen in every school system, if it wasn't dissing what's on the radio now, it's just saying if a radio station is not gonna give something like that equal play, then you have lost the fight. You've lost by not supporting something that has to totally obscure. And you know what? They call it hating all you want, but you can't hate, you can't love something that don't love you back. So all they talk about, I don't know why they talking about women. They're gonna talk about women. Well, what are you doing against the station management? My thing is like this, one thing we learned from the Panthers is the fact of identification. If you don't identify your enemy, how the hell you gonna fight? People over here, you live in a city, you don't know who your forget talk about political. Let's talk about what you sit your ass in front of watching TV or listen to the radio when you turn it on. You don't know the program director, you don't know the music director, you don't know where they live, you don't know who owns the station group. You turn on TV, you know Samsung made the TV set, the flat screen, but you don't know what's programming right up in your crib. Yeah, you ain't got to tell your kid, don't go hang out in the streets. They done bought, BET done bought the streets up in your crib for the last 15 years. So all that talk about how they need to present women right, how they need to stop thugging and all this, you know what? If you don't attack the source, and one thing that the Black Panther Party knew, they knew that there was a J. Edgar Hoover. They knew he was there, and the black community knew he and Nixon, you know, they knew names. We don't know no goddamn names. That's the goddamn problem. If you don't identify your enemy, how the hell are you going to fight? And that goes right back to education. I thank my wife, who's a professor at University of California, Santa Barbara, for also making me aware of what you're doing in UCLA and the movement that's going down today. You got to fight for yourself. You got to fight for the information and education. And once again, I tip my hat to you, Greg, because, you know, I heard undercurrents about the film, you know, but seeing this, number one, you know, I got emotions where I'm trying to really seriously contain my anger. But my anger is good because I know how to process it, but I really, really seriously am bothered by it because I get the full story of Bunchy Carter, and I felt the full story like I've never ever seen and heard it before. How do we convey that emotion and get it across to a mass audience? And that is the thing you have to fight for, and believe me, in the fighting has to be detailed. Like, you know, you can smile and figure out how to, you know, not just send a letter to your station management group, but you know what? Figure out where they are, where they live. They live in the same place you live, or sometimes they might live somewhere else. You say, well, why all this programming is happening there? So I'm not getting into that, but thank you. We got to fight for your film.
Kathleen.
Intelligence program, particularly for people for whom that's not exactly something they spend hours of their life and years of their life like me studying. It comes out of foreign war. Counterintelligence was the way the government used to defeat their enemies in war. And during the 60s, which is a war in Vietnam, they decided that they would use the same techniques they used against foreign enemies against the social movements, in particular what they called, which I think is insane, they called the Black Power group, the Black Hate groups. We were the Black Love groups. We were full of love. We loved each other, loved people. And then the parallel, though, is with the White Hate group, which is the Ku Klux Klan. So there are certain areas in which they function. And then when you say, I'm saying this because somebody said, what if there had been no COINTELPRO? That's like saying, what if there had been no slavery, and no war against black people, and no segregation, and no white racist structure, and no imperialism? That's where that is. COINTELPRO is like a little war tactic that it reinforces and sustains all that. So let's not begin to think that COINTELPRO is the enemy. COINTELPRO is the method that they use. And there are some very specific techniques of psychological warfare, chemical warfare, forms of torture, specific kinds of, charges, and then the courts would be involved and the media would be involved. There was dissemination of disinformation, misinformation, smearing, and I saw all those techniques. I saw them explicitly targeted against me, against Eldridge, against other people in the party. So it wasn't a matter of whether it wasn't there. It was, these are the techniques of warfare against us. That's all. So just say what kind of techniques that they use, and one of the key one is make you think your friends are your enemy is your friend. They want to control your association and demolish the ability to connect, among other things. So that's what we were up against. And we're lucky we're still here. We still love each other, but we don't, took me, I would say, maybe, I don't know how many years to stop hating Karenga. And finally, I said, I saw this movie in which a woman was talking about her husband, Medgar Evers, and saying Medgar said it didn't work to hate your enemy. And I said, you know, I've been hating Karenga all these years, and it didn't have no effect on him. Wasting my energy.
But you've spoken before. Can you let this? Oh, you had that. I'm sorry.
Don't take my turn.
appreciation to Greg for this film. And the question I want to ask you before I ask the question I want to ask the other panelists is, I know many of us are thinking, when is this going to be available? When can we get it? And that's one thing. And I also would like to thank Bob Uber for bringing the Pan-African Film Festival to every week. But I grew up in Los Angeles, as some of y'all know. And so for me, coming tonight was like, it's major because a member from us and Panthers are on the thing. You know, that would have never happened when I was growing up in LA. And so I want to know, and Scott went this direction already, what can we learn so that that type of conflict doesn't happen again? What can we tell our youth so we're not involved in those type of conflicts between organizations that, like Scott said, there has some cooperation and the vision was more alike than what the enemies was, right? And so how can we move forward from that? So both of those things.
All right, I'll start. The film is not available yet, and we are trying to get the film on television so more people can see it. So what we found, and anybody else out in the industry also knows, that if you have something they really want, then you can figure out a way to sell it to them and come to agreement on how to package it so they can make money off of it. So the first thing that we've done is we've done that with another project, with TV One. So what we did was we came up with an idea for a show with Casey and JoJo from Jodeci. And they really wanted Casey and JoJo on some sort of show on TV One. And they had did some sort of poll with their audience and found out that their audience really wanted to see these dudes. So we made a deal with them that as long as they let us do what we wanted to do and not no Flavor of Love type of show, that we would do it. So we got those brothers sober for 30 days and followed their journey and let them see, you know, assisted them. We gave them a life coach, Pastor Jamal Bryant. We gave them a physical coach, AJ Johnson, the actress that played the mother of Baby Boy. We gave them a psychological therapist for them to understand why they have been drinking all their lives. And for 30 days, they just saw their whole career and everything else different. And it comes on, here's a little plug, October 19th, it premieres on TV One. So now that I'm in the door, I got people saying, what else you got? So we've been, thanks to Babu and his wife Asantua, we've been able to really get an internet presence with this project. If you Google 41st and Central and my name, like 35,000 things have come up about the film. So we're trying to make it to be something that they want, that somebody wants. And then we can get it out to the masses. We don't want to sell it out the trunk just yet. But once it gets on TV, we'll probably bootleg it ourselves to make some extra money. But right now, we're going to try to get it out to the masses the best way possible.